There's so much happening around us. I thought I would try to help you make sense. And we hear all the time about technology and the blockchain and artificial intelligence and big data and augmented reality and blah, blah, blah. And it's going really, really fast, at least the amount of noise around us. And so I would like to hopefully give you a few tools on how to navigate this world. I don't want to give you a fish. I would like to show you how to fish. And so let's try to make sense of the digital transformation. I mean, the noise is really striking. This is a picture I took 2 days ago in Paris. And they are building like ATM crypto store somehow. It's like the Bitcoin craze. That store is going to open and do I don't know what. You can go and get some Bitcoins on an ATM. There's like people calling the media and say, hey, great news. The first word our baby said is the name of an Amazon device, Alexa. And they're actually super proud. It's like, it's amazing, right? I know in my books, I wouldn't call the media. I wouldn't be proud of that. But technology is everywhere. Police actually goes to funeral to get the finger of dead people so they can unlock their phone. This is a few of the crazy news that is happening every day. And I haven't even mentioned the name of the American president. So there is conflicting signals around us. There is this kind of vision where you won't see any human being on this picture. It's a video from a couple of years ago in China, logistical warehouse. And there's this future like no more humans. So are we going towards that, or are we going to have robotic suicides like this surveillance robot in Palo Alto who probably thought life was too hard and he jumped into the pool of the mall saying, I don't want to do that job, it's too boring. Next time you go to a wedding, maybe the priest is going to say something like that. If you think that the Tinder algorithm that matched these two guys did a bad job, please raise your hand. Maybe computers are going to be taking care of very serious things, or maybe robots are going to be at our service and doing very mundane tasks, like walking the dog. It's really not the same thing. I mean, the dog was not hurt, maybe. So let's try to make sense. There's all these signals around us, very, very contradictory. And so let's try to decode. Let's try to be very pragmatic. And when I became an investor, I went to ask a very famous Swiss investor, Neil Reimer of Index Venture. I said, Neil, what's your secret? And he said, le bon sens paysan, the good old peasant common sense from Switzerland. So let's do the same thing. Let's look at digital with le bon sens paysan. First, I really think it's very important to understand the hype mechanism that the technological industries run on. There is constantly noise, as I think I just showed you. And let's take one, which is one of the biggest hype of the moment, is that there's going to be no more jobs. So the studies are coming in, machines are coming for us. We are doomed. It's only a few decades away, 47%. There are other estimates, like 60%, 40%, A lot of numbers being thrown around, and it's true that some things are happening. Like this is Formula E, the electrical Formula Ones, and they actually run autonomous cars now on the circuit. And this was in Rome 3 weeks ago, and the robot was 16 seconds behind the human driver. So that's kind of the margin. Humans still have a 16 seconds advantage in that very particular task. You see automation coming to agriculture, for example. You see autonomous cars, but maybe there's going to be autonomous tractors. But actually, when you look at history, you see that there's been a lot of change. There's been a lot of technological revolution, and we have 140 years of economical data, and the data says that every time there is new technologies, there are more jobs. What happens, actually, is that the nature of employment is changing. This is from 1871. You see that the world is a lot about muscle force, carrying stuff, putting screws together, factory work, etc. And 140 years later, the nature of work has changed. Muscle work is down, and you have more caring profession, like sector tertiaire. And when you look, the disappearance of jobs has been happening all the time around us. We don't see these people lighting the public lights in the streets anymore. That has been replaced by electricity and automated systems. This is a very recent job that has totally vanished. Before Photoshop, before Microsoft Word, before printers, you had to actually stack the letters and painfully print every single page. These people have lost their job. If you play pinball, if you had played pinball 60 years ago, maybe this is the sight you would have. Thousands of people have lost their jobs to automated pinball resetting machines. And you didn't lose any sleep on that. Let me ask you, can you guess? I'm going to show you a video that was taken in 1907 in Ireland. Can you tell me what the job of this person is? And can you tell me who disrupted that job? It's somebody walking around with a long cane, knocking on windows. What is that job?
Alarm clock.
Alarm clock, exactly. It's called a knocker up. If you're English speaking, you're gonna laugh. It's a real thing. And these people lost their jobs to alarm clocks. And here is the thing. The hype is gonna tell you we're doomed, but the track record of innovation says technology destroys occupations, not jobs. There's a very, very big difference. And why are we afraid? Because we see the jobs disappearing. We see that some people are unemployed or that their skills are unneeded. What we don't see is that new jobs are appearing. These are some of the jobs that appeared in the past 10 years, tied to things that weren't here 20 years ago, like search engine and social media, e-sport. The e-sport industry is amazing. It's emerging right now. If you play Fortnite, there's like a $100 million prize money that has just been announced. It's huge. I was in Korea in 2007, and they were telling me, some parents actually tell their children, can you please stop playing real soccer? Could you play your video games so that you actually have a future? Because this is a real profession. I live in Rolle. This is a picture I took 3 days ago. These are the jobs that are appearing now. Naturopathe, hypnothérapeute, Reiki master, bioénergéticien, reboutage, radiesthésie. These are jobs that didn't exist 50 years ago, or there was no hairdresser 100 years ago. So we see the jobs that disappear, we don't see the jobs that appear, and that creates this sense of insecurity, and that machines are gonna put us out of work. But if you look at the track record, this is not what happens. And you have to take a lot of what the technological industries are gonna tell you with a pinch of salt. The hype is not reality. Another very important point, disruption is new. So that's, you hear that from a lot of people. I like maybe, Ray Kurzweil, the Singularity University, is like, these are the most dangerous and disruptive times ever. By the way, he can help you navigate that world for only $75,000. But I think that we lost a little bit a sense of perspective. And I'm reading a book right now, very interesting, written in 1979, called The Culture of Narcissism, about how American society is becoming very narcissistic. And the author makes a connection between narcissism and history. It's like the more you think you're amazing, the less you're gonna want to look at history. Why? Because looking at history makes you very humble. I love history. I actually have a radio show. I'm working on a TV show now. This is a preview. It's going on the air on Arte. And it's called Paléo Futur. And the concept is to say, let's look at what's happening now, and let's look at what happened in the past. For example, crowdfunding, Kickstarter, right? Such a great idea. You go there, you have a project, and you go online and you raise money from your community. Actually, there's a guy who's running a 2,000-year-old startup, was here today. He landed in Geneva, he did a big show, and he left. And he's been living on crowdfunding for 2,000 years, right? This is what they do. At the end of the Mass, they go, oh, will you repeat crowdfunding? Oh, great, such a new idea. Elon Musk has to install these superchargers because there are no chargers for electric cars. Obviously, André Citroën and all the people innovating in the 20th century with petrol cars, they had the exact same problem. There was no network for getting gas for the cars. So they launched their own network of like supercharging stations with their brand on it, and you could stop and buy some gas. Same problem, same solution. Retail, Amazon, Apple, all these people, I'm gonna dig a bit into that. The amazing brands, it's like a temple, you go, it's beautiful, and you buy online, you can bring your device back and get some service. There's actually Manu France. They went out of business like 20 years ago. They were founded in 1888. And this is what they were doing. They had like vertical integration, like IKEA. They had their own factory. They would sell their own product via mail order. They had like synergies between physical stores and home delivery. You could get your stuff, bring it back to the store. 1905 or something. They had their own private label, like, you know, this strange furniture you get at IKEA, like the weird names. Like, they were doing the same with, at the time, the newest technology, like type machines and sewing machines and bikes. They had 10 days exchange, no questions asked. This is a picture from the 1907 catalog. Actually, Sears was delivering homes to your doorstep in 1923. These guys were actually much crazy than we ever going to be. And actually, you know, some of these homes are still standing, and they cost $2,000 in 1923. So, you know, we constantly rediscovering the same ideas. They're coming back, they are supercharged, they have a different flavor because of digital, but it's not the most disruptive time ever. And actually, I don't say that to knock on anyone. I say that I think it's very reassuring to realize that, you know, there's been a lot of innovation happening before us. This is the Belle Époque, the golden age of Europe, 1850 to 1914. It stops a bit abruptly in 1914. These are the technologies that society had to integrate. Some of them, there were 30 new technologies. I mean, you know, it's a bit bigger than social media. Electric light, vaccine, artificial cold, airplanes, etc. All these were invented. That was quite an innovative time. 50 million people go to the Paris Expo in 1900. That's like 20 times more than any event that has happened since. So disruption is permanent, and we've been doing quite well to this point, despite of it. We need to stop thinking that our times are special, because they are not. And yes, a lot of things are changing. We have new tools, we have new assets, definitely as brand. Now you have your reputation, you have your followers, but all that did not really exist in that form a few years ago. But a lot has not changed. I spend my life telling people, listen to your customers. This has been true forever, and it's going to be true forever. That has not changed. Digital is not going to change that. You have a problem, you solve it with common sense, being pragmatic. That hasn't changed. Innovation, we are currently rediscovering that, but it has been in the DNA of most of our corporations. If you've been in business for more than 30 years, you probably have innovation in your DNA. You cannot stay in business for long without doing that. So I think it's very important to frame this according to reality. And, you know, there's always this fear of the future, that we're going toward worse times, etc. And there's technologies making the kids totally asocial, etc. And yes, people have been afraid of technology forever. Another point that I think is very important. I was invited by a French company to speak, and after my talk, they asked me, can you stay and be a jury in the hackathon? And they had, you know, it's a very trendy thing now. They had like 15 teams competing, and the task was, please have an idea for an innovation that the company could do. 15 groups, huh? And then as a member of the jury, I had to sit down for every pitch. And every pitch started with, our idea is an app that. It's like, innovation equals app? Is that really the truth? And we are totally crazy about technology. And we try to solve problems with it. Like this is actually an art project, but kids are going to their exams these days. But that might happen very soon, that you have technology like drones flying to look at exams. But for at least most problems, you have a technological solution, and you have a low-cost solution. This is what they do in Thailand for exam cheating, like 3 pieces of paper, no noise, no battery draining, nobody needs to operate the freaking drone, and the same result. This is what we do in Europe. You go to the train station, you want to buy a ticket, you have to go and say, is it a national travel, international travel, blah, blah, blah. Very often they have to pay an employee to go next to the machine because, some people don't understand how to do it. So actually the person presses, gives you your ticket, like, thank you. If the idea was cost saving, that didn't really happen. And so we do this, and it's amazing, etc. And this is what they do in the Philippines. It works really well. You just you put your shoes and you go sit down, and then the next person moves all the shoes forward, and it's totally free. It never breaks down. Battery is never empty. There are different approaches to solving the same problem, but there is always a technological and a non-technological solution to it. We don't need cameras in Switzerland. We have grandmothers, and they're really bored. They have a lot of time. Lowest crime rate in the world, or one of the. So, we forget that we have so many ways that we can innovate with our business model, with our internal structure, with how we talk to people, with making our services complementary, with changing our pricing models, with how we communicate by adding channels, etc., etc. This is so important. Sometimes the innovation is actually to remove technology. I really like what the French Post has been doing. Gosh, I realize at this point I sound like I'm paid by the French government to talk about French innovation, but absolutely not. But this is really interesting. What they say is that the mailman and the mailwoman, every day they visit every home in the country, and you can actually pay them to have a coffee with your grandmother. Such a great service. It has nothing to do with technology. It's actually humanizing. And now you can surprise your customers by actually having them talk to someone. This is where we are. It's like, are you a person? Yes. Can you help me? Yes. Wow! You're such a cool company. I love you. So humanization is actually a form of innovation now. And so technology is one of the many types of innovation. I'm not saying you should not do technology. I'm saying you should keep in mind that it's one of many, and technology, like everything else, should fight for its life. And I have to say, is it really relevant to use technology to solve that problem? So often you see solutions looking for problems in that world. Another misconception is this idea that technology is magical. This is a quote, 1858, the internet of the moment is the telegraph. And people thought it would bring world peace. Why? Because everybody can talk to each other. There's going to be no war. 1858. There's been how many? Two global wars, war between Germany and France, endless conflicts all around. And this is the 21st century version, right? We're going to make the world more open and connected. And I'm not sure Zuckerberg would go on stage with that slide in 2018. Unfortunately, technology is not magical, and you hear constantly these kind of articles telling you, 90% of accidents are going to be avoided thanks to autonomous cars. And the news cycle these days is unfortunately more about autonomous cars crashing, because like every single technology, it has flaws, it's not perfect. And you hear about blockchain a lot. If we have 2 hours ahead of us, I could tell you how it works, what it does. It's quite complex to understand, but here's the thing. Visa can process 2,000 transactions a second, and they can go up to 15,000 a second. And Bitcoin is like 2 to 4, 3 to 4. So it's a technology that brings you a lot. It's amazing. It distributes trust. It creates a lot of transparency, etc. But it comes with limitations, because every technology does. The limitation of Visa is that you have to trust Visa, and they have to not be hacked, etc. But it's not a magical thing that's going to wipe out everything that happened and solve every problem. This is just not how technology works. And when you look carefully, for example, data is a big thing. It's having a big moment right now. Big data, use data to manage a company, etc. Yes, data is very important. But data comes with limitations. Data really struggles with human interactions. How do you qualify the quality of the relationship between your salespeople and customers? How do you put that into a number? How do you put a number of someone's reputation? How do you put a number on someone's, creativity? We cannot really do that. That's a limitation of data. Data lacks context. I sit on the board of startups, and we look at all these numbers, like 35% of our customers don't finish the checkout. We have no idea why. We don't know it's because they had to rush to the hospital to give birth, or because our interface really sucks. We just don't know. Data is really bad with complexity. If we could model complex problems, the weather service would not suck as much as it does. Because we could put all the weather system into a computer that would, predict it perfectly. It's not possible because it's too complex. There are too many things that you cannot really capture. Data needs math. If you launch a new product and you only have, 5 people testing it, you don't have enough data that you can train a computer to analyze it, etc. So if you have a small sample of information, only humans can do something with it. Computers cannot do anything with it. And obviously, data is about the past. So you hear it about predictive things, yes, but as long as you're trying to predict something that has happened in the past. And I show you history rhymes. It does not repeat, it rhymes. It's a big subtlety. So you're going to miss, if you use data to predict the future, you're going to miss all the black swans and unexpected things and disruptions and, blindside hits, etc. So data is great, but it has limitations. And this is the story of technology. It's always gives and takes from you. This is Germanwings. Germanwings, the co-pilot crashes the plane voluntarily into a mountain. You say, let's automate airplanes so that, that cannot happen. It's a great idea until you hit a few birds taking off from LaGuardia and you have to land an Airbus in the Hudson River, which is fairly unpredictable and hard to teach a computer to do that, knowing that you would have to land, 5 million Airbus in that precise river so that the computers would figure out how to do it. It's not possible. So philosophically, we actually need, and effectively, each choice you make has limits, and that's why maybe it has to be both. And by the way, very often the limit of technology is people, yes. This is my favorite slide ever. It's like this is such a good metaphor for business. Like you make your business plan. This is like a straight road, and we're going to put this barrier, and people have to pay to lift it. And then this happens. Then humans happen. So speaking of that, one last point about decoding the moment we're in is that more and more, actually, there are so many people who know the future. People who say, in 2050, this is going to happen, or computers are going to be able to do this and that. And, if you look back, futurists are very lucky that nobody really, looks back at what they said 5 or 10 years ago, because the future is very, very hard to predict. This is a past buzz that came in the year 2000, something like that. It's the Segway, if you remember. And the press was crazy about that device. People were fighting to invest in it. It's going to replace walking. You're never, ever going to need to walk again. And maybe you're going to see a Segway with a few cops who've been punished at the Amsterdam airport, and they have to ride it while people take pictures of them. This is actually the device that sold instead of the Segway. It's like the 60 francs micro scooter. And nobody really, it's impossible to predict the future, really. It's absolutely impossible. And nobody knows the future. And I think when you hear somebody telling you, this is what's going to happen, be very skeptical. Take it with a pinch of salt. Maybe they're right. There's a big chance they're not right. And you need to be very humble. And by the way, if somebody's really, really think they know the future, tell them, like, just run a hedge fund. Stop giving conferences. This is, you're going to leverage your incredible knowledge much better. So what's really happening, I think that these are 5 keys that I would like you to keep in mind. There's a lot of buzz, look beyond it. The digital transformation, the big thing of the moment, is just continuity of what has been happening around us for a very, very long time. Innovation does not equal technology. Technology is one of the many, many tools we have in our toolbox to innovate. Technology has limits. It's not a silver bullet. And the future is very unpredictable. And that has consequences. So what to do about that? How do you, hopefully you can read, you have like a reading grid, as we would say in French. You have a way to look at things, hopefully a bit more pragmatically. So how do you organize? What do you deduct from that? What do you do with this? And I think one of the best summary of the transition that we're going through is this quote from Joy Ito, who's the head of MIT Media Lab. And he says, we were born in a world of maps. It's like we were born in a world that was fairly easy to put on paper. If you're a business, could probably tell you, these are your competitors, this is how they make money. These are the technologies that are slowly deploying over the next decade. And so there was a map. You could kind of build 5-10 years plan, and the environment would not change too much. And now, obviously, the world is totally different. And all we have are compasses. And, if I drop you in an unknown area and you don't have the map, there is nothing you can do. The beauty of the compass is that wherever you're dropped on the surface of the Earth, the compass is at least going to give you a direction. You are at least going to have one piece of information that can never be taken away from you, and that's going to help you find your way. So what is that compass to navigate this world that I try to describe? I think these are like big principles, big values you could call them, that I suggest guide your action. The first one is that we need to stop thinking in terms of physical and online. We need to stop making that distinction. This is a distinction of people who are born before year 2000. I have a 4-year-old. The hardest thing to explain to her is why Netflix does not work in the car. She has an iPad that she sometimes can play with at home. There is Wi-Fi. Netflix works. We go on the road. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense to her because it's invisible. It's the internet. And probably I don't even bother explaining her because I don't think she's going to have to understand that because we go towards unlimited pervasive connections. And so these two worlds are really merging. And there's a very interesting industry to look at. It's retail. So the retail we know was invented in the 1950s by Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, who understood the big innovation at the time was bigger stores in the periphery because there were cars coming into society, and self-service. Before, you would have a lot of staff helping you fill your cart. And that industry was doing really well, and then in the 1990s arrived the online retailers, the disruptors, Amazon, 1991, I think, Amazon. And what happened for the next 20 years was that the physical retailers tried to copy the online retailers. So they just took Walmart.com, and they tried to copy the online retailers. And really, there were two different worlds. You had the physical retailers able to give you immediate satisfaction because the objects are, whatever you want to buy is already here. There was a possibility to create an experience because they could play with, decoration and smell and lights, and you could touch things. There was curation, so there had to be a limited number of products. You couldn't store unlimited things. And then there was the online that was like specializing in something totally different. Convenience, order anytime, get it delivered home, you don't have to carry your water or whatever. 24/7, long tail, they have like the known products, but they also like all the, you want some crazy book that hasn't been read since 100 years, they can still get it for you. So you had these two worlds, and then the new generation arrived slowly, you know, the famous millennials, and in their mind, they said, oh, we would like to have both. I would like to have 24/7 and immediate satisfaction. I would like to have affordability and sustainability. I would like to have a social experience, even if I am online, which to this point is quite hard. And so what happens now is that the online people are opening stores. Since 2015, and Amazon, by the way, bought Whole Foods, a whole chain of supermarkets. Bonobo, Warby Parker, Lyft, the big competitor of Uber, just announced they're going to open resting centers for their drivers. So the physical brands are, the online brands are going physical. And the movement has started in like the other direction now. They are the ones who say, hey, we'd like to open stores and figure out how this works. And so we go towards this type of offering. This is the service that every brand should look for. You know, have the convenience, but also the experience. Have the instant gratification available all the time. And actually, when you look carefully, there is a lot of signals that the frontier is being blurred between both worlds. I was in Beijing 2 weeks ago, and this is a really bad picture I took at the restaurant, but the way you pay at the restaurant in Beijing is that there is a QR code on the side of the table. You snap it with WeChat or Alipay or whatever app you're using, and then you show the waiter the confirmation code, and then you leave. Is that a physical or an online experience? I'm in a restaurant, I use my phone, I show to the waiter. That distinction does not make sense. This is the pickup points that Walmart is opening into their stores. So now you can go to the website, order something, they put into the pickup point, and you show up, and you don't even have to talk to anyone, which is very important for the millennials. And is that a e-commerce? Commerce? Yeah, doesn't make sense. McDonald's, if you go to this kiosk, which, by the way, have increased the average basket size because now you don't have the social pressure saying, I would like 3 Big Mac, and people is like, huh, really? Is he gonna eat that by himself? That's not very healthy, sister. So now you can order and nobody looks at you. And so the orders are going up. But the thing they do is that they ask you, would you want to log in into your McDonald's account? Why do they do that? Because they try to take your online identity, the data they have about you, and to put it back into the physical store experience so they can know your preferences, etc. Online, offline, both. This is RATP is the public transport in Paris, and actually there is this sign that says, even if you paid your subscription with us, if you didn't punch your card when you came in, we're going to fine you. Why? Because we need the data. And so there you're in the physical world, and they're trying to collect data that then is used in the digital world to improve the service. And it's so important to them that they're going to fine you, despite the fact you're a subscriber, just because you didn't tap your card in the bus. Online, offline, hard to say. This is HQ. It's a very interesting app that launched a couple of months ago. And it goes against everything that we've heard about the digital world. It's actually a quiz that is done live by a person every day at 7 p.m. European time. It's like, no, it's an app. I should be able to play with it when I want. No, there is like a rendezvous, and you play on a global scale with everybody at 7 p.m. And so it's the digital world, but they reuse the excitement of a live event coming from, which is a page from the physical world playbook. So again, the frontiers are blurred. You can now ask your friends what they think of what you're about to buy on Shopify. It's like they put your basket aside, and you can ask your friends what they think, and they give you, little hearts, OMG, LOL, buy it, And then, basically, you socialize the online experience, which normally only happens in the physical world. So here's the thing. These two channels that we've opposed for so long. We thought commerce, e-commerce. We thought in-person work and remote work, etc. It doesn't make sense. We need to stop thinking like that. Both channels need to come together because they have strong advantages. When you talk to Cyril Lamblard of Nespresso, maybe he was here a while ago, he's a regular teaching at IMD, he's the head of e-commerce for Nespresso. He tells you online, we try to give you convenience. We try to get you out of the door. You want to renew your order, get more capsules. It has to be fast, convenient. When you come to the store, George Clooney is here to give you a little coffee, and they try to keep you in the store for a while and sell you other products, etc. It's just two different and complementary experiences. And one of their secrets, one of the things they do so well, is that they actually put the revenue of the postal codes around the store. The online revenues are attributed back to the store, to the physical store. So if you're the physical store manager and somebody comes and there's a lot of queue, if you tell them, why don't you go home and order, you're not killing your own revenue. It's attached back to your performance. So they destroyed the competition between the channels by doing this very simple trick. So physical and online are coming together, and it's a very important thing to keep in mind in how you prepare your own future. Intuition and data. I've talked about data and its limitations. And data is very, very important. Data allows you to do incredible things, like understand how people navigate a city. This is Madrid on the evening of the Euro final. You see like everybody gathering in the center. There's goal number 1, goal number 2, and then it's going to be like big party, and everybody's like calling each other, etc. This is incredible. You deploy something, and you can really understand, like never before, how people use it and the struggles they have, etc. But this is good for one type of innovation, which is iterative innovation. You go from the left to the right. It's kind of the same idea, but people would like to have bigger screen. Okay, let's make a bigger screen. But there's this famous quote from Henry Ford that he actually never said, but that still drives the point home. So if you ask your customers what they want, they will maybe say faster horses. Why? Because they cannot possibly project themselves into a future that has cars, because cars do not exist. And data is very good to iterate. It's very bad for this kind of innovation, the disruptive innovation. Going from here to here, you cannot possibly ask your customers about this device because it does not exist. Even the people making this device have no idea that you would use it to make pictures of slides in 2018 or pay your bills or whatever. So intuition is actually a very, very important thing that we need to focus on and that we need to add back into our models. And actually I sit on the board of a company. They are actuarians in English, like people building mathematical models for insurance companies. They're like incredible geeks playing with like terabytes of data. And they're re-adding intuition into their model. I talked to someone at BlackRock. They were telling me the same. We put back kind of intangible factors into the models, because if we don't do that, everybody has the same model. Warren Buffett has a very interesting image. He says, technology is like you're at a concert, and suddenly you innovate so you can get on your toes. And so you start to see better. But at one point, everybody's on their toes. And so you're back at square one. And that's why we need intuition, and we need to focus on it. And I single it out because, of course, these days, we hear a lot about data, and data is very, very important. It's very useful, but it's not everything. Intuition and data need to be taken together to listen. That's what data allows you to do, but also to anticipate, which data cannot really help you with. I think it's very important to consider that it's not going to be, we're not going to be out of work. I think I hopefully convinced you of that. And I think what we're going towards is this kind of collaboration between people and machines. This is a video I took in 2016 in Zurich. There's a very interesting event. The next edition is in 2020. It's called the Cibathlon. It's actually the Olympics for cyborgs, people with smart prosthetics. Prosthetics. Thank you. And so there's like 5 different competitions, and this is exoskeleton race. This person is fully paraplegic and cannot walk, cannot stand up. And technology goes around his body, and suddenly, he can move and he can do things. And so technology is here to augment him and give him skills that he couldn't possibly do. And when you look carefully, one of the reasons I think that the future is a combination of both is that it's actually 2 very different kinds of intelligence. Machines are very good for force. Yes, of course, a crane can lift the weight that no human is ever going to be able to lift. If you have tasks that are very repetitive, machines are going to be very good with it. What you can predict, what you can measure, very precise work, machines are going to be very good with that. But we humans have a few aces in our game. Agility, empathy, social intelligence, creativity, cooperation, having opinions about processes. Toyota is removing robots from their factories because the factories never suggest an improvement to a process. So they actually put back very old workers who look at the process and say, yeah, maybe we could do it this way. So it's just 2 very different kinds of intelligence. And this is a project from the EPFZ. And it's a construction robot, but you don't see the robots working by themselves. You need humans to do some of the tasks, and hopefully the humans don't have to carry heavy stuff around, they don't do the dangerous tasks, etc. But it's a collaboration between both. And so I really believe that the future is people and machines creating augmented humans. And by the way, technology has been augmenting you and I forever. Like with a knife, you have a better chance of having dinner tonight if you're a prehistoric person. This is just what technology does. It gives us skills that without we wouldn't have. Like you have in your pocket a device that gives you the possibility to teleport your voice to the other side of the planet. That's an incredible augmentation to your skills. Another very important point, I think that's a big shift from the usual Silicon Valley discourse, is that I think we're coming back from this idea that the startups have everything right and the rest of the world are just like a bunch of late, sorry losers. And I'm actually an investor in a fund, and we help fintech startups. So for those of you who work in finance, we've invested in like Betterment or eToro or Moven, Currency Cloud, Asimo, etc. And there's a big change in that industry, is that at the beginning, a lot of people said, we're going to put the banks out of work. And the reality is that the focus is shifting, that actually the startups have a specific role, which is to try new things and go fast and test the new business model. And the large banks have another role, which is to deploy things, grow them, go from 100,000 customers to 50 million. And it's actually about ecosystem. I was in Station F a couple of days ago. Maybe you heard about it. It's this big startup incubator that was opened by Xavier Niel, the founder of Free. It's a former train station that they renovated, and it's incredibly beautiful inside. And I don't think you can even find a baby foot or like a ping pong table, which is like the big cliche of startup. It's really done well. It's like incredible art. And actually, this is one of the main buildings. And on the right of the picture, you have Ashoka, so like not-for-profit institutions. You have startups. There is an Amazon logo because Amazon is here. There is a Leroy Merlin as a tech shop here. There is LVMH, the big luxury companies here. Of course, there are startups. The investors are here, etc. It's a whole ecosystem under one roof, with every actor having their own role. And I really think that the perception is changing. And I would like you to listen to what Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, was saying in 2016 at the Recode conference. And I think it's very interesting, and it signals a shift in the mindset.
If you go back to when I started Amazon, all of the heavy lifting infrastructure to support Amazon was already in place. We did not have to invent a remote payment system. It was already there. It was called the credit card. We did not have to invent transportation. There was this thing called the US Postal Service and UPS. But if we had had to deploy last mile transportation 20 years ago, it would have cost hundreds of billions of dollars of capital. It would have been impossible for a company like Amazon to even conceive of doing that. There was also, how did the internet grow so fast? Even there, the heavy lifting infrastructure had already been done for another purpose, which was the long-distance phone network.
So it's incredible to see, probably the most successful and the smartest entrepreneur in Silicon Valley acknowledge that he couldn't have done what he has done without the government. The internet starts as a DARPA project, US Army. The GPS that we all use every day is a US Army project. A lot of innovation comes of the NASA labs, etc. So actually, innovation needs an ecosystem. And I know at IMD, there's a lot of people working for large companies. There's also a lot of people working in SMEs, etc. But everybody has a role to play. And just like I told you, we should stop opposing online and physical, humans and machines, data and intuition. We need to stop opposing all these types of players. Everybody has a role to play. And by the way, there is room for a lot of different types of actors. Lastly, and this is a big one, I think there is you guys are mostly, from what I understand, managers, entrepreneurs, executives, and so you end up having to lead people and manage people. There is a book that I read 2 weeks ago, and I cannot not recommend. It's an incredibly well-written book. It's really fun to read. There's a lot of anecdotes, and I think the learnings are really key. And the story is written by General McChrystal, and he's the guy who gets sent by the US Army to Baghdad in 2003. And his job is to coordinate the Army, the Navy, the US Air Force. So he sits in the middle of these different armies. And objectively, he has the best weapons, he has the best hardware. Objectively, he has the best soldiers. He has more soldiers than his enemy. His budget is 5,000 times the budget of his enemy. And every day on the ground, he loses. He gets his ass kicked. And people die because he's fighting a network of few hundred people called Al-Qaeda that blow themselves up in public places and kill hundreds of people. And they are losing the war. And so the whole book is about the journey he makes to, first understand what happens and then react to it by adapting his organization. And the first thing he has to swallow is his ego. Because, you're the US Army, you come, like super strong, like you come off choppers, you have nice sunglasses, you're like, we're going to kick this guy's ass. And the first thing you have to realize is that it's just not going to happen. If you keep on using this mindset, you are going to lose. And so the first thing they do is say, maybe we have to learn something from these terrorist organizations, which is a very big step for any leader, and probably even more a military leader. So he says, okay, let's look at what they do. And he starts to diagnose the problem. And one of the problems he has is that he says, our processes are structured in a way that by the time we start executing our plan, the situation has totally changed. For example, these people function as an organic network. They're coordinating using technology, and they never stay at the same place for 1 or 2 hours. And the processes of the US Army is like somebody listens to the audio transcriptions, puts it into writing, translates it. It's like reviewed by someone, then it goes into the command chain and blah, blah, blah. And so by the time it reaches the general who has to make the decision, go, no go for the red, it's been 2 days. And then the information trickles down and they make a plan. And so they arrive to an empty house. and these guys have, the terrorists have left 4 days ago. So totally inadequate processes to fight an enemy that just doesn't work. He jokes in the book, he says, I think we killed the number 3 in the Al-Qaeda hierarchy like 50 times because there is no number 3. We think of them that they had to have some kind of hierarchy, but they don't. It's like one leader, and then everybody's dispatched at the same level, and if you cut one piece, somebody comes up. So their mindset was inadequate to conceive the enemy they had, so they couldn't fight it. And so basically, I tried to summarize a bit the ideas of the book. Really, read it, it's worth it. But basically, I think the whole point is that we still operate very often as if the 20th century was not over. So what was the 20th century? That the world was complicated. Complicated. What does complicated mean? Complicated means it's a big task that you can chop down in smaller tasks, and then you do all the small tasks together, and then you achieve the bigger task. That's complicated. It's a lot, but if you look carefully, you can solve the problem. It's a world that had little data, but interestingly, it was more predictable. There were less moving parts. The mindset behind this was determinism. And determinism, what it means, determinism is the idea that if you create the same conditions at the beginning of the process, you're going to get the same output. You can reproduce things. That's determinism. And the big idea that actually has weighted and shaped organization is Taylorism. Taylorism is a revolution shown at one of the global expo in, I think, 1906 or something. Like the world goes to see the assembly chain that Taylor has put together that is able to output 20 times more than what has been done ever. And so it's this idea that, we're going to do a long line of very specialized people all doing their own thing, having absolutely no idea of what the ensemble is doing. And then, because the world is complicated, because we know that if we reproduce the same conditions, we have the same output, then we're going to solve problems like that. This is, factories to do cars. You put steel and workers and machines, at the end you get cars, and the cars all look the same. And it's a world that is tailored for robustness. What you want is that against a known threat, you are very strong. You can predict that the enemy is going to attack you from the front, so you build a big wall. That's being robust. This is what this organization led to. So you have a lot of control, because everything can be predicted, it's processes, you assemble them, so you can control it. And at the end of the day, he says that he was trained to be a chess player. You have a board, you fight an enemy that has to play with the same rules than you, and you move the pieces and they do what you tell them. That's being a chess player. It's very rewarding, because as a general, you're like, they cannot fight this war without me. Everything has to go through me. I'm calling the shots. That's the mindset that he had, and that was leading them absolutely nowhere. The 21st century mindset is that the world went from complicated to complex. Complex is very different. Complex means you cannot possibly, it's like the weather. The weather is complex, it's not complicated. You cannot possibly map the weather. You cannot possibly understand all the mechanisms. Why is the world complex? The amount of information an intelligence service has to process has been multiplied by 5 million. Before you wanted to spy on someone, maybe there was 2 calls, 5 letters. Now there is billions of communications happening. The world is complex because things are much more interconnected. The Arab Spring Revolution starts because there is a street seller who puts himself on fire, somebody makes a video, and then you have social unrest. Could not happen before. So things are much more complex. And we have more data, and the world is less predictable. What you need in that world is agility. what you need is resilience. You don't know where the threat is going to come from. So you'd better be ready to move your troops around and do what you can in an unexpected situation. And so the opposite, kind of what he preaches, he doesn't use the word in the book, but this is the word that I see that summarizes it. It's more like design thinking. This idea that you actually look at the problems very pragmatically, you listen, you learn, you try solutions, you improve them, the like lean startup thing, business model canvas, Alex Osterwalder, you guys know about him, I'm sure. And so it's a totally different mindset. It's a totally different approach to problem solving. And you cannot possibly control that world. You cannot possibly control a very complex network of people that have to face an endless number of situations. So you have to actually create autonomy. And that's why the book is Team of Teams. His big insight is that you need to not that everybody knows everybody, that doesn't work, but that at least every part of the organization is connected to the rest and knows what the organization is trying to do. And he says he had to swallow his ego a second time after acknowledging that he had to learn from Al-Qaeda. He had to understand that he, as a manager, was slowing down the process. He was part of the problem. Because by the time decisions would come to his way, 2 days would be lost. And very often, all he would do was like validate the decision that was brought to him by the lower rank people. So at one point he said, make the decision. I'll cover your ass if it goes wrong. And we'll say it's my decision. And just by building trust and by creating autonomy in what he called shared consciousness, he was able to do much better and eventually turn around the situation in Iraq. And he said he was trained as a chess player and he had to become a gardener. I think it's a very interesting image. It's like you, as leaders, as managers, what you can do is create the conditions for people to strive, and then they flourish, and then they deal with the problems. He tells a very incredible story that actually the Navy and the Army have two very distinct cultures. In the Army, you have to wait for orders, and then you do things. In the Navy, you do things, and then if you do something wrong, you're going to hear from your boss who's going to tell you to stop doing it. Two very different cultures. Why is that? Because of the Postal Service in the US. On the ground, the people in Washington could communicate with the generals because the US Army was fighting wars on their own ground. So you could possibly think that a general fighting a war in the west of the country, in 3 or 4 days, they would receive your orders. So the generals would get orders from Congress saying, if you get an attack from the right, do this. If you get an attack from the left, do this. Absurd, still happening. Why? Because it was possible. At sea, in 1880, it was very hard to communicate. So they had to give you autonomy. They had to give you powers. They had to give you, rules of the game and trust that you would make the right decisions. And that's why the Navy was getting incredible results in certain campaigns. And so they were getting autonomy. Why? Because you could not possibly communicate with the boats. And that shaped the culture of these organizations later. And so I think this is really an important point, that we need to change how we approach the world, and that the context has totally changed, and that there is a need for a new culture. And it's something that I'm really convinced that you cannot possibly predict the future. Nobody can tell you blockchain is going to do this with any certainty, or AI or whatever. And so today, it's a world of compasses, not maps, which is why your structure, the way you think, the algorithm you have to react to events is actually your strategy. You cannot, that's why startups, they don't do these 50 pages business plans anymore. It's like, oh, we're going to capture 1% of the Chinese market, and so we're all going to be very rich. Yeah, of course. How many times have I seen that freaking pitch? This is just not how it happens. Now you come with business model Canva, and you say, this is what we do, and if that changes, we'll do that. Totally different mindset. And your structure is your strategy. Your culture is your strategy. And so I really think that the future is not about opposing all these different things. It's not about, when you hear about digital transformation, you shouldn't fear that it means there are no more humans, or that we're going to be irrelevant. There is this also a great book I really liked that I discovered 20 years after everyone, which is this Built to Last book. I think Jim Collins is the name of the author. And he went to look at the DNA of companies that have been innovating for a very long time, but nobody talks about, like Disney and Boeing and GE and 3M, super innovative company that totally get overlooked. And one of the things they found is that it's companies that think and instead of or. It's like, oh, you can perfectly run your business and prepare the future. You can renew your stock of ideas and promote people internally. And so it's this and mindset. I think it's very, very important. And one of the best reads you can do these days about artificial intelligence, if you're interested in that topic, is the book written by the guy who has been fighting machines for 30 years, Garry Kasparov, whose title was taken away in the 90s by a Big Blue. It's a very, very interesting read. For example, it tells the story of how somebody tried to teach a computer how to play chess using machine learning. So machine learning is a form of artificial intelligence. What you do is that you feed the computer with a lot of data, and then the computer learns how to reproduce what they read. And so there was an early attempt at doing that. And so they took only the best players, because you want the computer to mimic the best players. And they fed the computer all the games that were played by these grandmasters. And then they turn the computer on, and the first thing the computer does is that it takes its queen and sacrifices it. And if you play chess, you know it's really not a good idea. And what happened there? So they went back to the drawing board and like, what happened? What happened is that actually, when you look at grandmasters and you look at the pattern in how they play, there is that thing that very often their last move before going for the kill is that they're going to sacrifice their queen. And so, you take the queen and then you're dead. And so the computer is like, here's an interesting pattern. I lose my queen, I win on the next move. Let me do that again. So it's a very good metaphor of how different the intelligence of machine is. And he makes a point that we are tricked by the word intelligence. This is not intelligence. It's useful, it's something, but it's just not intelligence. And I didn't know that, but you can actually measure how good a chess player wins. There's like a bit like ATP ranking in chess. And actually, there's a scoring system that constantly evolves depending on who you play, etc. So you can say Kasparov was like 5,300 or something, and he was the highest ranked human player ever. And so humans were leading for a very long time. And in 95, the computers finally, reach a higher score than human players, like a few hundred points above what the best human player had ever done. And so computers had an advantage. And there's only one thing that ever had a bigger score than both the human and the computer. It's both playing together. It's like if you give a grandmaster a computer that they can use to calculate, to forecast what's going to happen on the board, to test some scenarios, to do calculation that only a computer can do because a chessboard is like billions of operations. If you do that, then you reach a score that cannot be attained neither by the computers themselves or the humans themselves. And I think that's a good metaphor of what we should look up to, and that what we should be doing. And I really like this quote that I think is very helpful, is this idea that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. You've heard it many times, but I think it's a very useful mindset for what's ahead of us. So thank you very much for your time.